And so now you getting, you're becoming more of yourself. You're focusing on your classes. You're focusing on what your goals are. You're doing the thing, and so then you graduate. What did you immediately start doing when you graduate? Did you go um straight to into the work? Did you do like what did you do right after?
Now I was unemployed for a year and a half.
Okay.
Um, yeah,
Right, right. No,
I
okay.
moved home,
Hmm.
and oh, I was sad because there's a long story that I wouldn't have enough time to explain. But I thought that there was something I thought I was going to be doing when I graduated, and it fell through, and it wasn't even remotely close to happening, and so I had
What
to go
was that?
home. So I was supposed to be working at a law firm for a year, and I was also supposed to be house sitting this super wealthy couple who was going to be in Europe, and they were going to pay me to watch their house. So I was going to do that while I
Mm.
worked at the law firm, and that would buy me 1 year while I figured out if I was going to grad school or not. And then if I did, by then I would just go ahead and go to grad school, or I would just start the workforce. That was the plan. I was either going to, so I was going to stay in DC and then go to New York. None of that happened. And then I found out literally the week of the graduation that okay, the job at the law firm is not happening. There's some logistic stuff, we can't do it. And then the couple is no longer going to Europe because we're in recession. They're going to just stay home and save
Yeah,
their
that
money,
recession, boy. Ugh,
man. And
it was,
so
yeah, it just did it. It just did it to
uh,
you. Huh?
I
Yeah.
remember. I mean, now my parents were happy for me to come home. So, and I would say honestly, it worked out because I didn't know my father was sick at the time either. He had
Mm.
scleroderma, and it was starting to advance. So it actually worked out. Oddly enough, I can say that now, but at the time, I couldn't. I wasn't trying to be back in Spanaway after being in DC for 4 years. Um, and so yeah, I remember going back home. I remember walking to my parents' hotel with my little suitcase, depressed, like I cannot believe I'm going back to this ish. And then got home. I saw that same bunk bed I had from when I was 12 waiting for me.
What?
I was like,
They didn't change it. They didn't change your
yeah,
room.
no, it was a futon bunk bed I had. So you had to
Ah,
sleep on top. So I'm climbing up at 21. I took a nap. And then when I woke up from the nap, my grandma died. I'm like, you got
what?
this.
What?
I can't win for, yeah, my grandma had died.
Oh my
I'm
God.
like, Lord, yeah, 20, that first year out was a time.
Yeah,
Me
it
and
was
that
a
same
time.
best
Yeah.
friend that I was telling you about for music, we had fell out in that year. Everything that could go wrong went wrong in that year.
Yeah, you had that pile up.
It was like pop, 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 just surprise,
Yeah.
surprise,
Oh my
everything
God.
you could think
Yeah.
of. But at the same time, it also planted the seeds for a lot of the stuff I do now. So everything still worked out.
Yeah, apparently. I hope it did. Like, it's. I mean, because I mean, it just has to go up from there.
Yeah,
The light has to be there. The light has to be at the end of the tunnel at that
somewhere.
point.
I
Yeah,
couldn't see it for
somewhere.
a minute because it was
Okay.
so bad. And being in Spanaway during the recession, again, this is a town that doesn't have a big industry. I had to compete with people who had been laid off from Boeing and Microsoft and Amazon for jobs at Applebee's and Kmart. And it was so bad,
Mm.
Applebee's wouldn't even let me wash their dishes because that's how competitive it was. So I was down so bad, my mom was just giving me $20 every week. I was like,
Oh,
which was kind of like what I was getting in
oh,
high school, but I was like, $20, that ain't even enough for
yeah.
gas anymore. But yeah, but that's around the time I started the YouTube channel. That's when I started getting into comedy.
Got it.
Everything
Hmm.
still worked out.
Okay. Yes. Thank you for that segue. You just segue so well, Calvin. Thank you. I just love how you just go right in. Yeah, I like that. Yeah. So yeah, but so that year was you reached one that year was kind of a drought. It was a rough
Hmm.
patch for you. But then like I said, you reached that light at the end of the tunnel. What was that light for you at that time?
That light was I had landed the job at the
The
community
job.
center with the kids.
Okay.
Hmm.
All right. And so and you got that job. What was your responsibility? What were you
So I
doing?
was the branch director of that community
Mm.
center. So I was in charge of the logistics, the financing, the grants, day-to-day operations, but we were underfunded and understaffed. So I was also
Wow.
very hands-on with the kids where when the way that the role was presented to me was I'll be in my office doing all the stuff and making calls and making things happen and hey, let's do lunch. And then I would come out, shake a kid's hand, and go back in my office with my suit on. It was nothing of the sort when I got there. I was mixing paint and crayons and we wiping noses and so but I loved it. It was a lot of fun. So it was
Yeah, I can imagine. It sounded like it was.
yeah, so
And
they
so, okay, and so now so with that position, how did that mold you into all the other
woo,
aspects of, like, how did that mold you? Because that took that position had to take you somewhere. It had to take you, or it had to mold you,
Yes, it
Yeah.
was a lot. The first year was a test because I was looking at
Yes.
new jobs. Like I ain't about to do this too long. And it was because okay, I had a supervisor that was a micromanager, but we were underfunded. But they still wanted you to make magic happen with nothing. Because we were down so bad that like I didn't have a company credit card the first few years, and we
Mm,
were given kind of like a little allowance to play for your center, and that allowance was $150
wow.
a month
Ugh,
for a whole center. That's
ugh.
snack, that's field trips, that's incidentals, that's so you end up spending your own money to make do
Yes.
with what you don't have because at the same time the
Yes.
organization at that point was going through furloughs and they were closing a few centers because the money was funny. So there's that, and then that specific center opened in 2007. I got there in 2011. In those 4 years when I wasn't there, they had 7 different directors. So the
Ooh.
kids initially didn't take on to me right away because they figured,
Right.
just like how I was talking
Right.
about my
Right.
experience with military
Yeah.
kids,
The
that I'd be
detachment. Right.
leaving.
The
Yeah.
detachment. Yeah.
And
Hmm.
so it took a minute for the kids to warm up. The parents were a little skittish. And then this wasn't a big center. This wasn't a center with gyms and football fields and no, it was a converted 3-bedroom apartment in an apartment complex that
Mm.
they made into a full
Wow.
community space. And that center was a multi-purpose room, a computer lab. I ended up making a teen room out of this other room that used to be used for storage, and then the kitchen and a bathroom. That was the center. And
Wow.
so I had to make some magic happen. I learned in that process, relationship is everything. And so I started building relationships with people in the county, in the area, vendors from different stores. And by doing that, we were able to get a full renovation. Because when I got there, the center looked like hell. It was roach infested to the point where
Mm.
even on the stove, when you look at the clock, those digital numbers, you could see little roaches walking inside the clock.
Oof.
I was like,
Oof.
I know I didn't fly 3,000 miles away to do
Mm.
this, right?
Yeah. Yes.
So
But but
it
you were there for a reason. Let me ask you, what is your spiritual beliefs before I go any further? What are your
I
spiritual
was
beliefs?
raised a Christian, Kojic Church of
Okay.
God in Christ.
Oh,
Lord,
oh, okay. All right. Now here, okay. So now,
Lord,
okay.
we was deep
All
growing
right.
up.
Oh, okay. All right. So there you. All right. So I wanted to tell you that God, placed you there for a reason. That you had a purpose to fulfill, and you did it well. So
Yeah.
you had implemented, what you did so much with so little, and I'm
Mhm.
sure that the people in that center was very appreciative. So how did they receive you after that? I know that.
Oh man,
Yeah.
once
Okay.
we got into our pocket, those were some of the best years ever. And what's crazy again, I was grossly underpaid, but the reward was so good because it was like, plus the team that I worked with, all of us, we all stayed the entire 11 years together. Nobody ever quit or got fired or anything, and so we came up together. We were all the same age. We were all like early 20s. Folks got married and engaged and stuff like that. And then with the kids, the neighborhood had a waiting list for people to move in. So I always had the same cohort of kids the full 11 years. And so kids that were in first grade when I started were graduating when I left. And then, so it was just like they grew up with you. And eventually, once you have the trust of the neighborhood, things just change. It got to a point where, because it wasn't always the best neighborhood, but when stuff would go down out there was a respect for that community space. People knew, don't bring no mess to that center because there's a guy and his people over there that are making sure all our kids are good. So when the adults were doing their shenanigans, or somebody about to go shoot at somebody or something, they knew to never bring it to the
Don't
center.
break it.
And it
Right.
rubbed off on the
Yes.
teenagers. The
Yes.
teenagers knew drama from school. Don't let no other group of teenagers from another neighborhood come in here with no mess. And so people respected the space, and it made the entire neighborhood better in general.
And I love that. Okay. And
Yeah.
I'm glad you added that because I was just, as you were talking, I'm thinking about how important community is, how
Yes.
important. And you have not just having a community, but you have to be in sync enough to actually make that happen to where they will be protective over your,
Yes.
protective over that, over that safe space. Because there's a safe space for those children. There's a safe space for, um, so the fact that the community itself were able to protect that safe space,
hmm And I can't
phenomenal,
take all the credit because
phenomenal.
my number two who worked there, she was from the neighborhood, which was God
Hmm.
sent. Like she grew up there
Yes.
even before the center was owned by our company. And so she also spoke the language of the neighborhood. And so when there were things that I didn't understand culturally, or she could give me that insight. And so the two of us together, like that was some magic.
Yeah, no, that's what I said. Very, very phenomenal.
Mhm.
Yeah. So yeah, congrats on that.
Thank you.
So now once you transition from, how long were you at the center? How long did you work there?
11 years. So I started
Oh,
in
you living?
August
Oh, okay. You started right. Right.
of
Okay.
in 2022. Yeah.
Okay. And so from there, where did you go from there?
So from there, then I started working in a company that supports a lot of like the federal agencies and stuff where I do a lot of websites for a lot of companies now. So I did a full 180 career wise. And what it was is it gave me the luxury to work from home and give me time to put more energy into my projects and stuff that I also like to do. The only challenge I had with working at the center was that you give up so much of your personal life. You give up so many weekends, if we're closing at 7 or 8 o'clock, and then I still live 30 minutes away from the center, and maybe I have an engagement or something at 8:30 or 9 p.m., but there's a little kid whose parent hasn't picked him up yet, and I can't go until
Right.
then.
You can't go.
Stuff
Right.
like that, or there's the teenager who decided this is the day they're gonna run away.
Mm.
Today, like right,
Yeah,
there's a
like
concept I'm trying to get to,
I
right?
have some plans set. Like, oh my,
Man,
like
yeah.
this is a detriment right now. Yeah,
It's at the
yeah.
same time I was working for a magazine freelance on the side that was based in New York, and a lot of times I have to be in New York for film festivals and stuff to cover for the magazine. So I was doing that. At this point, I'd already jumped into music. I jumped into all this other stuff. I was burnt out. I was exhausted
Yes,
because again,
yes.
with kids, I always tell people like when you work with them, if it's a day where I have 55 or 60 kids, all of them want your exact same energy. You can't, whatever's happening in your personal life that day, you got to just
It
pause
don't
it
matter.
and take it to your car when the day's over. But when you get in there, they want all of
It's
you.
all about them. It's all
Kids,
about
and,
them.
and they
Yeah,
all got different energies. The little kids have a different want than the teenagers, and you got to give it all. And it's great, but sometimes you're just exhausted. And so trying to
yes.
do that and do all of my creative endeavors and all my projects and, have a social life. And, I was telling somebody did not get to experience a full summer where you get to go on beaches and vacations until I was 32, 33, because every summer for me was summer camp where I needed to run summer camp. And spring break, I needed to run spring break camp. And then during the holiday season, yes, you can see your family for Christmas, but you still need to run a winter break camp because these camps are when we make all of our money. Because
Right, right.
we were only charging like $50 for membership a year for the kids, and so to make your money back, you get it back from the camps and whatever you get out of grants and donors. So I sacrificed all of my
Yes,
20s, and so
yes. I mean, yeah. You put in a lot. You put in a lot of work.
mhm.
Yeah, you really did.